I'm Dr. Christie, and this is Climbing Fish Parenting, practical parenting strategies in 20 minutes or less. I'm a psychologist and behavior analyst, and I work with exhausted, overwhelmed parents who feel like they've tried everything and nothing works. If you're listening to this while folding the laundry, hiding in your car, or wishing bedtime would just end already, you're in the right place. Today, I want to talk about the fear, the one you don't say out loud, the one that shows up at night when the house is quiet and you let yourself wonder, is my child going to be okay? Not today okay, life okay. By the end of this episode, I want you to see that fear differently than you do right now. Ready to transform your parenting journey? Let's dive in. I want to start with something you already know, something you live with every day, probably without naming it. There's a distance between where your child is right now and where the world seems to expect them to be. Maybe it's a big distance. Maybe it's smaller than it used to be, but still there. Maybe it's shifted. The area where the distance is greatest has moved as your child has gotten older, as the demands have changed, as the goalposts have quietly moved without anyone announcing that they moved. That distance, that specific, daily, impossible to ignore space between where your child is and where the world expects them to be. I'm going to call it the gap. And I'm not using that word to make it sound clinical or fixable or like something you need a program to address. I'm using it because I think it's the most honest word for what it actually is. A space, a real space, one you live in every day. Most parents of kids who are wired differently spend an enormous amount of their daily energy managing the gap, getting their child from one side of it to the other, filling it in temporarily with their own presence, their own scaffolding, their own willingness to show up again and again, and then doing it again the next day, and the next, and the next. And most of the time, because there's always something more urgent happening, always another morning to get through, always another moment that needs managing. There isn't space to look directly at the gap itself, to ask what it actually is, to sit with what it means, to wonder, honestly, whether it's the same size it was a year ago, or whether it's getting smaller, or whether what you've been doing is moving anything at all. Today is about looking at it directly, and I promise, the looking is worth it, even when it's uncomfortable, maybe especially then. Here's what I've noticed working with families over the years. The gap looks different depending on where you are in the journey, but the feeling underneath, it's remarkably consistent. And I want to describe two parents I see constantly, because I think you're one of them. Maybe both of them at different moments. The first parent has a younger child, 5, 6, 7 years old, maybe 8, and this parent is already exhausted in a way that surprises her because she thought the hard part was the infant stage, the toddler stage, the getting through each day stage. And somehow, she's still in the getting through each day stage. And around her, other parents are starting to dream out loud about who their kids are going to be, the friendships they'll make, the things they'll love, the ordinary, unremarkable milestones that somehow feel enormous. And this parent loves her child so completely. She would do anything for this child, but she's standing in her kitchen at 7 a.m. trying to get through a Tuesday. And the future, the wide open, anything is possible future that other parents seem to be able to picture so easily, feels like something that happens to other people's children. Not because she's given up on her child. She hasn't, and she won't, because she cannot see the road from here to there, and nobody is helping her see it. The second parent has an older child, 12, 14, 16, maybe older, and this parent has been doing this for a long time. She knows her child's brain now in a way she didn't when they were younger. She's learned what to lean into and what to avoid. She's read her child the way only a parent can, after years of paying the kind of attention nobody else was paying. She has gotten very good at managing the gap. But lately, maybe in the last year, maybe longer, something has shifted. Because her child isn't 7 anymore. The window that felt wide open when they were little is starting to narrow. Not because her child is running out of time. They're not. But because the distance between where they are and where they will eventually need to be feels real in a way it didn't before. Not theoretical, real. And the question she can't stop asking herself, usually at night when everything is quiet, is this: if I keep doing what I've been doing, if I keep managing the gap the same way I've been managing it, is anything actually going to change? Two parents, different stages, different versions of the fear. But here's what I want you to hear. And this is important. So stay with me for a second. Kids who are wired differently don't follow typical developmental timeline. We've talked about this all month. The executive functioning in a brain develops into the mid 20s for typical kids, and often much longer for kids whose brains are wired differently, which means the fear isn't really about how old your child is. It's about the gap. And everyone in this community lives somewhere in that gap, regardless of whether their child is 5 or 15. The parent of a 12-year-old with significant delays might be living the younger child fear. The parent of a 7-year-old with a profile that looks more like a teenager's emotional volatility might be living the older child urgency. The gap is not a function of age. It's a function of distance. And the distance is what I want to talk about. I want to say something now that I think most parenting conversations, including a lot of really good ones, skip past because it's uncomfortable to look at directly. And because naming it means acknowledging something that most parents would rather find a way around than sit with. When you're raising a child who's wired differently, there is a grief that comes with it. Not grief for your child. Your child is not a loss. Your child is a whole person, full and real and worthy of every dream you have for them. But grief for a particular imagined future, the one that formed before you knew what you were dealing with, maybe before your child was even born. The one made of uncomplicated milestones and predictable timelines and a path that looked like the one you saw other families walking. That future got quietly revised. For most parents, it didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment where someone sat you down and said, "The future you imagined is not the future you're going to have." It happened slowly, in small moments. The birthday party your child found overwhelming when other kids found it magical. The teacher conference where you held it together in the room and cried in the car afterward. The morning that was supposed to be fine and wasn't. The thing your child's friend could do that your child couldn't yet. And the way you both noticed, even if neither of you said anything. And somewhere in those small moments, without ceremony, without anyone acknowledging that something real was being lost, you revised the dream. You became more careful about imagining the future. You learned to manage your own hope the way you manage everything else in your child's life. Carefully, strategically, one step at a time, with a lot of scaffolding. I think about the parent who told me once that she used to lie awake imagining her daughter's wedding. The dress, the flowers, the look on her daughter's face. And then she stopped. Not because she stopped loving her daughter, because she stopped being able to hold that image without the fear rushing in alongside it. So she put it down. And she told herself it was okay to put it down, that she was being realistic, that she was protecting herself. I understood her completely. I've been there myself, in my own version of that moment. And I also wanted to say something to her that I want to say to you now. Putting down the dream was not the only option. It felt like the only option, but it wasn't. And I want to stay here for a moment because I think this is one of the things that gets carried the most silently. The grief of the future you quietly revised. Nobody acknowledges it. The people around you, the ones who love you, the ones who are trying to help, often don't even know it happened because you were so busy managing everything else that you managed this too, quietly, alone, without letting yourself feel the full weight of what you were putting down. That weight is real, and it has been real for a long time. And you've been carrying it largely without anyone naming it for you. So I'm naming it now, not to make it heavier, but because unnamed things have a way of growing in the dark, and named things can be worked with. And what I want to show you is that this particular grief, the grief of the imagined future, is not the end of the story. It's the place where the real story starts. Here's what I know from working with families for a long time, and from raising my own wired differently kid, and from watching what happens when the support finally starts matching the brain instead of fighting it. The gap is real. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. I'm not going to hand you a list of inspiring stories and tell you everything works out fine if you just believe hard enough. That's not what this is. But the gap is not fixed. and the story is not written. My daughter is wired differently. She struggles with real things daily. Most people who know her would never guess how much, because in the right environment, she flourishes. And what I've watched happen over years of trying to get that match right, trying to build the right pond instead of asking her to climb, is that she's grown into herself in a way that genuinely stops me. She moves through the world to her own rhythm. She's okay with who she is. More okay, honestly, than most of the adults I know. That didn't happen by accident. And it didn't happen because I found the right consequence or the right sticker chart. It happened because the support finally started matching how her brain actually works. Because I stopped measuring her against a timeline that was never designed for her. Because the future I eventually found for her looks different from the one I originally imagined. And it's better, not easier, better. I'm telling you this not because your child's story will look exactly like hers. It won't. Every kid is different. Every profile is different. Every family's version of the right pond is different. I'm telling you because the parent who lies awake imagining their daughter's wedding and then putting that image down because it hurt too much, that parent doesn't have to keep living in the putting down. There's something on the other side of the grief, a different future, not a lesser one. A path that actually fits the child you have, not the one you originally imagined. But, and this matters, that path doesn't appear on its own. It doesn't open up just because you love your child enough or try hard enough or show up enough. You have been doing all of those things. The path opens when the support starts matching their brain, when what you're doing every day is actually moving the gap, not just managing it. And knowing whether your support is doing that, knowing what to keep and what to change, and what the right next step actually looks like for your specific child, that's the question I want to spend Thursday evening on. I'm doing a free training this Thursday, May 7th. It's called The Accommodation Trap, and it's built around exactly this. Not to add to what you're already carrying, but to help you see which parts of what you're doing are moving the gap and which parts might be holding it in place. Register at climbingfishparenting.com/webinar. The link is in the show notes, and it's also going out in this week's newsletter. I want you there. Between now and Thursday, I want you to do one thing, just one. I want you to notice one moment, just one, where you step in and help your child with something. And instead of evaluating whether you should have stepped in, I want you to ask a different question, just to yourself, just in the space of a breath. Is this moving something? Is the support I'm giving right now pointed somewhere? Or is it doing the same job it was doing a year ago? In the same way, with no particular direction attached to it. You don't have to answer it definitively. You don't have to change anything based on what you notice. Just notice. Because what you see when you look at that question is exactly what we're going to work with on Thursday. Bring it with you. I'll be there. All right, that's it for today. The gap is real. The fear is real. The grief of the future you quietly revised, that's real too. And it deserves to be named. But the story is not written yet. Not for the 5-year-old who's making it through Tuesdays. Not for the teenager whose parent has stopped letting themselves imagine the future because imagining it hurts too much. Not for any of the kids in this community whose brains are wired differently and whose timelines don't look like anybody else's. The story is not written. And Thursday is about what you do next. If this episode named something you've been carrying, that's exactly where we're starting on Thursday. Register at climbingfishparenting.com/webinar. The link is in the show notes. I hope to see you there. That strategy I just gave you, it's the whole climbing fish philosophy in action. There's a quote, everybody's a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. Your kid isn't broken. Your parenting isn't broken. Sometimes we're just asking our fish to climb trees. That's what we fix here. I'm Dr. Christy, and I'll see you next week.